Hello, today we're going to be going over the Fallout 4 perks and ranking them all, showing you which ones are best and which ones are worst. Of course, with Fallout 4 you can take all perks eventually, but it does take quite a while, so you may want to focus on some of the higher tier perks, and then work your way to the lower tier perks as you have more expendable points to burn. And if you want to see some specific builds on where exactly to spend your points on your first 50 levels, I'll have my Fallout guides linked above and down in the description if you'd like to see them. So let's jump into this and rank these guys. Alright, so the first one we're going to grab is the Iron Fist. So we need to rank this a S, A, B, C, or D, depending on how good it is. Now, what this one allows you to do is unarmed combat, where you punch your enemies with your fist, and it seems to correlate with the Power Fist weapon as well. But if you land a critical, when this thing's maxed out, if you land a critical, you can paralyze your enemy, but you have to use VATS to do that. For the most part, unfortunately, your fists, even with this perk, just don't make the cut. So we're going to give it a D. After testing this perk, it just isn't a great standalone perk. If you want to run up to someone unarmed and paralyze them, it's a lot of fun. It's hilarious, but ultimately it doesn't really help you out in combat. And the damage is negligible late game. Speaking of melee, next up we have Big Leagues. Where should our Big Leagues weapon go, right? What this is basically increases your damage and ability to use melee weapons. Stats improve weapon stats in the game, like baseball bats, boards, batons, swords, things like that. So we're going to give it a B ranking. It's not amazing, but it is nice. If you're going melee combat, it's good, but melee combat in itself in the game is not amazing. Very limited and gets dull pretty fast. So we'll give it a B ranking because it does do its job, but it's just not fun. Alright, next up we have Armorer, and essentially this allows you to make mods for your armor to improve how good your armor is. And this is a really nice skill, but you're going to be able to find a lot of the mods in the game, so we'll drop this down into A ranking. Because it is a good to have skill, but you don't necessarily need it until later in the game. You'll be able to find some decent armor pretty early on, and you'll be able to find some mods to put on it without having to craft them. Alright, next up we have Toughness. And Toughness, pretty much, once you max it out, gives you 50 more damage resistance. So to give you an idea of what 50 damage resistance is, if you have a full set of combat armor and you have modified them a little bit for your armor skill, you have about 80 physical armor resistance with a full set of combat armor, which is kind of heavy. So it's like having several pieces of combat armor without having to have any combat armor. So this definitely helps you damage resistance. So we'll drop this into the A ranking. Okay, so a quick note is that this Toughness, if you notice, it falls into the 1-star category. So you can get this without leveling up any endurance whatsoever. So that's why we're putting it into the A ranking, whereas Refractor here should be an A ranking as well, right? Because this gives us a plus 50 to energy resistance. So this is the other resistance in the game besides radiation resistance. All right, so this should be A ranking, but unfortunately requires 7 points into your perception skill to even start accessing it, which makes it less useful because you have to burn so many points just to get down to it if you weren't going down that path to begin with. So because of that, we'll go ahead and drop it into a B ranking just because of how many points it takes to get to. So it's not quite as good as Toughness. Next up, we have Awareness. All right, so what Awareness does is in VATS, it lets you see the enemy's weaknesses, and when max, it gives you a slightly more damage to the enemy when using their weakness. This takes a lot of points to get to, and it really isn't all that useful. To make it work properly, you have to carry several different type of weapons so you can swap between them. So we'll drop it into the C ranking just because it's not super useful. You're probably just going to have whatever weapons you have ammo for. Next up, we have Pickpocket, which has a very similar image to Lockpicking, but it's a different skill for some reason. Alright, so Pickpocket, what it basically lets you do is if you can sneak up on someone and not be seen by anyone else while doing it, you can steal stuff out of their pockets. Supposedly, this is a great way to steal fusion cores if you can sneak up on someone in power armor, but you have to have a really high sneak to make this skill work, so it requires a lot of points in the sneak, and if you're not a stealth character, then this skill won't work great for you. Know that you're only going to get a few minor things. You might be able to take their weapon away before starting a fight or something, but other than some fun and comedy, it's really not that useful of a skill, so we'll put it in the C rankings. Next up is Rifleman. What Rifleman does is increases the amount of damage rifles deal and also ignores some of the armor of your enemies, which allows you to deal even more damage and save more ammo. And there are more rifles in this game than any other type of guns. On top of that, the rifles are also one of the highest damaging guns in the game, and shotguns are classified as rifles as long as they're not automatic. Anything automatic does not fall into this category. You only need to put 1 point into perception so that your perception is level 2 to get access to this, and it is one of the strongest perks in the game. So we're going to put it into the S ranking. This will pretty much allow you a ton of versatility in the game. You can be a sniper, shotgunner, combat rifleman, and the list goes on. And then we have Sneak, and what this skill does is basically when you crouch in the game, it allows you to stay undetected, which allows you to do several things, such as get around enemies without being spotted, land sneak attacks and doing extra damage, pickpocket, things like that. And if you're going a stealth character, you must have Sneak for your stealth character to work. Sneak is an interesting skill, and we could spend a lot of time talking about how it works and the different ins and outs of it, but for the purpose of this video, we just need to know that it is a good skill to take if you're wanting to be a stealth character. So for that reason, we'll drop it into the A ranking. It's not a great skill for every single type of character, but it is if you're going for a specific playthrough. Right, next up, we have Animal Friend, and what this does is basically let you point your gun at an animal and pacify them. You'll get a pacify option, press it, and if your skill check outperforms their skill check, you pacify them, and you can kind of command them around and make them fight for you or whatever. It's not amazing, and personally, I want to put any points into it. I'm going to put this in the D ranking. It doesn't really help out all that much. And now that's also going to be true for Wasteland Whisperer and Robotics Expert. I think the developers had a direction these skills were going to go in, but the skills just don't feel like they finished them, and they just don't seem to work super well, and yeah, they're just a little finicky. On top of that, if somehow your new friend manages to defeat an enemy for you, they can eventually become hostile against you as well, and you don't get experience points for the kill. So I just don't see this being useful other than for some giggles and fun. Right now for the skill of blacksmithing, which just basically just lets you modify your melee weapons and make them stronger so you can do better in melee combat. Melee combat itself is not amazing and not a great thing to maybe use as a standalone ability, but if you like switching to melee weapons, it might be something. So go ahead and drop this into the B ranking along with melee, because if you're going melee, this is necessary, otherwise it's not. So we're on combat skills. We have the Commando. The Commando skill is for automatic weapons. If you like using automatic weapons, this is the skill you're going to want to level up. It takes a few more points to get it down to it than some of our other combat skills, and on top of that, automatic weapons use more ammo, and each bullet deals significantly less damage than single shot versions of the same gun. So we're going to put this perk as B ranking. Then we have lockpicking. And basically what lockpicking does is it does just that. You pick locks. The higher the skill is, the better the locks you can pick. It doesn't necessarily make the locks any easier. As a matter of fact, the locks get harder the higher level they are. But this allows you access to them. Without this, you cannot even attempt to pick the locks. There's a lot of really good items, quests, and stashes hidden behind locks. So lockpicking is a must-have if you're going to play Fallout 4. The alternative to lockpicking is hacking, which is the same thing except lets you hack better computers. Of course, the higher level the hacking terminal is, the harder it actually is to hack, even if you have the skill. So we'll put those both in the S tier. If you find hacking hard for you, make sure to check out my video on simplifying hacking. Right, then we have Lead Belly. What this allows you to do is pretty much drink any radiated water source without getting radiated, so you can heal from the water sources. And while this is probably good for survival mode, it's not good for anything else, because if you drink from radiated sources and get radiated, you have plenty of options to get rid of the radiation. There is an item you can build in the game that lets you de-radiate yourself every time you go back to your settlement. So this is really probably only useful for survival mode. So I would give it a D, but because it would be useful if you were playing survival, I'll give it a C. And next up, we have Cap Collector. And basically this allows you to get more caps when selling stuff and buy stuff at less caps. It'll also let you invest in shops, which allows you to get more caps from them after a rest period. So if you didn't know, when the shopkeeper runs out of caps, you can't sell to them anymore. You could still trade for items they have, but you won't be able to get other caps from them until a certain amount of time has passed, and then then their caps will refresh, and this will basically increase the amount of caps to get every time they refresh. Alright, so unless you're just wanting to build up bottle caps, this one's not an amazing skill, but this one doesn't take a whole lot to invest into it, and it will give you better buying prices. So once you start getting water purifiers going, you'll have a lot of water to barter with, and the amount of caps they want for something isn't going to make as big of a difference. So we'll pop this into the B rating because you can live without it, but it could give you access to certain items sooner rather than waiting for a little bit more water to build up to get that same item. Next up, we have Lone Wanderer, and this one is great if you don't want to have a companion with you because it increases your carry weight and damage resistance by quite a bit. Alright, and it's a percent-based damage resistance. But this one's really only good if you're going to be traveling with just your dog or no companion at all. So because this one is circumstantial, even though it's really good, if you're going to be using companions, again, it doesn't really work other than having the dog with you. So we're going to drop it in A since it's circumstantial, but really good. Next up, we have the Lady Killer and Widowmaker, depending on if you're playing male or female. This one basically increases the amount of damage you deal to the opposite sex and also allows some different conversations to be had with them. So you may get some different choices during conversation, or even may be able to influence the conversation. But since it only applies to probably half the characters in the game, it's not amazing. You can definitely get better things for dealing damage, but if you're wanting that extra conversation, this could be good. So we're going to drop it into the C ranking. Then we have Vans. And what Vans does is it basically has a kind of a quest line for you when you're trying to follow a quest and you go into VATS. You can, if you activate VATS outside of combat, it'll kind of help you out on locating your quest if you're having trouble. This really isn't that good. The little compass minimap pretty much works well, so we'll put it in the D ranking. Next up, we have Gun Nut. Now what this is allows you to modify your guns. Modifying your guns can greatly increase their damage, range, and usefulness. So you can add silencers, scopes, different barrels, receivers, stocks, all kinds of things. So this is going to be very needed if you're using guns in the game. And unless you're just going straight melee, you're probably using guns. So we're going to drop this into the S tier. It'll be needed for every playthrough with guns. Right, then we have Pistolier. This is another combat skill. This basically increases the damage and how much damage resistance is ignored by pistols, allowing your pistols to be more devastating in combat. But unless you find a very special pistol, most pistols are going to be still way weaker than rifles. So unless you just really enjoy using pistols, this is not a great skill. We'll go ahead and drop it into the A tier for those that enjoy using pistols. And then we have Strong Back. And what this allows you to do is carry more weight. It's not nearly as much weight as Lone Wanderer, but if you're going to be traveling with companions, you might want to take this in order to loot more, and at higher levels, it'll allow you to fast travel while encumbered, which can be really nice if you're a big looter. So we'll go ahead and drop this into the B tier list because it's not as good as Lone Wanderer, but it is definitely still useful. Next up is Scrounger. And what Scrounger does is basically let you find more ammo when you do find ammo to loot in boxes. Ammo is pretty scarce in this game, so this is if you're using guns, this is a must-have. So we'll put it into the S tier. Then we have Fortune Finder, which like ammo allows you to find bottle caps whenever you would loot bottle caps from a container. And its final level allows enemies to drop bottle caps when they die, increasing the number of bottle caps you get. But in this game, you have settlements. You can set up water purifiers, and then you can sell purified water. And all you have to do is wait a little bit of time in town in a bed or something to get the water that you need to buy whatever you want. So this skill is one of those that's mostly useless in this game, just due to the other mechanics that are in the game. If you aren't planning on growing a settlement and having food and water to sell, then you may want to take this skill. But due to other mechanics being more useful, we'll drop this down into the D. Alright, next up we have Mr. Sandman, and for those running stealth, if you're going to have silencers, this is only good for your running silencers, so not melee and other guns like that don't have silencer mods. This increases your damage from silenced weapons. If you find someone, if you can actually locate a person sleeping in this game, you can use this to instantly kill them as well, but you won't get XP for killing them in this manner. But it does increase your silence damage, which is really good for stealth builds. So we'll go ahead and drop this into B ranking. Next up, we have Aqua Person. And what this skill does is basically lets you breathe underwater, don't take radiation damage from swimming in water, and then eventually, when you go underwater, your enemies completely lose track of you. So this would be really great for getaways or stealth playthroughs as well. But the ability to go into the water and swim around without having to breathe and without getting radiation damage is really nice. And you can find some interesting loot underwater. So for me, this is a must-have skill on every playthrough. but it could also just be completely ignored and never used, and you would be just fine without it. So we'll go ahead and give it a B ranking. Then we have the Mysterious Stranger. And if you use VATS a lot, this guy will show up in VATS and do some damage to your enemies. But even when this guy is maxed out and your luck stat is maxed out, he still barely appears. Due to the Mysterious Stranger's lack of wanting to show up very often, I would give this guy a C tier. When he does show up, it's really nice. You can get some criticals from it, but most of the time he's a no-show. So this would be a skill to take after you've already got all of the skills you want. Then we have Bloody Mess, and basically Bloody Mess permanently increases your overall damage by a small amount to everything. It also has a chance of making your targets explode when they die. And at max level, if somebody explodes, their nearby allies may explode as well, basically giving you an instant kill. So this is really nice. I'll give it an A ranking overall because you don't necessarily have to have it. The amount of extra damage you can get from it is decent, but you can get more for the same amount of points somewhere else. But for later, when enemies are getting stronger and you already have your max built, this is a great way to boost your damage a little higher. Next up, we have Life Giver. What this does is increase your hit points by just a small amount. And then in its final point, it lets you recover hit points slowly. And when I say slowly, it means very slow. It's not worth taking. You get very few hit points from this, and the hit point recovery is super slow. This thing needs a big buff. So it's pretty much useless, so we'll drop it down into the D ranking. Alright, next up we have Heavy Gunner. And basically this is the combat ability for large guns. These guns are going to be like the Flamer, the minigun, the mini nuke, the piggy bank, things like that. Most of these guns don't have very much ammo in the game for them, and are ultimately just a lot of fun. They do a lot of damage, and they're really nice. But you can't keep ammo in them, so you can't constantly use them as your main weapon. So we're going to give this one a B tier, because if you do like to use those guns, you're going to want to level this up to maximize their damage so that you can save as much ammo as possible. But they're not going to be useful for constant play. Then we have the Medic. And the Medic perk basically increases how well your stim packs work. That's the important part of it anyway, as it will reduce the amount of stim packs you have to use overall, allowing you to get the most bang for your buck. So we're going to drop this into S ranking. This is probably something you would have on every playthrough. Then we have Demolition Expert, and this one is ideal for players who are going to be using a lot of explosives. Allows you an easier time of throwing your grenades, and it gives you damage resistance against explosives and also increases your explosive damage. So if you find yourself oftentimes using explosives and taking damage from them, you may want to drop some points into this. Explosives already do a lot of damage, so this isn't necessary to take. So this is one of those I would wait till after I finish my build to take. So I would drop it into the B ranking. Next we have Attack Dog. Now if you're going to be the lone wanderer or that travels with his dog, this is a good one to have, as this will allow your dog to be more effective in combat. So we'll just drop it into the B ranking since it's very specific. Then we have Chem Resistance. If you ever played a Fallout game, you know that using Jet and Buff Out and things like that will increase your skills and slow down time, allowing you to make more decisions and act quicker in combat. It can be super useful, but you get addicted to them and it reduces your stats. And then you have a big negative. So what this does is allows you to resist becoming addicted, and then ultimately you do not get addicted at all. So if you're going to be using a lot of chems in the game, this is a great one to take. So we'll drop it into the A ranking. Next up, we have Night Person. This basically increases some of your stats at night and makes you more effective at playing the game only during the nighttime hours. This is pretty far down on a tree, takes quite a few points to get to, and just really isn't all that amazing. It's kind of underwhelming for what it's supposed to be. So we'll put this into the D ranking. Next, we have Radiation Resistance, and it does what it says. It resists radiation. And if you hate radiation and don't want to be bothered by it, this is an okay one to take, but there are so many other options, including an option that you can just put in your settlement that basically decontaminates you as you walk through it every time you go back to your settlement. Radiation is pretty much a non-factor, so we're going to drop this into the C classification. Then we have Local Leader, and if you have a settlement, this one is a must. It allows you to connect all your settlements together so that you can share your resources between all the settlements. This will also allow you to build shops in town, which will allow you to make more caps. And so since Fallout 4 is based on settlement building, we're going to drop this into the E classification. I would put it into B, but settlements is part of the game. All right, then we have Scrapper. And Scrapper just lets you get better parts and more parts out of the items that you scrap. So all these guns you find from the enemies that you're hanging onto, you can take them to your workbench and scrap them and get more supplies from them. Same thing with the armor. So the higher level you're scrapping is, the better the items you're going to get when you're scrapping. And these items are used for modifying your armor and weapons and building up your settlement. So this is a must-have for every playthrough. So it is S ranking. And the next up is moving target, and this one sounds really good. Well, while you're moving, you have a great damage resistance. But unfortunately, it means sprinting. So unless you find yourself sprinting during combat a lot, this one is not that useful. You only get the benefits while sprinting. All right, so due to that, I'm going to drop it into the C ranking. Then we have Action Person, and what this one basically does is grant you more action points and faster action point recovery. And you find yourself sprinting across the Commonwealth and needing your AP recover much faster, this is a great one to have. And if you're also using VATS a lot, this is a really nice one to have. So we're going to drop it into the A ranking. Then we have Better Crits. And basically what this does is increases the amount of damage your critical hits deal. And if you don't know, there are very few cases where you can crit outside of VATS. So if you're not using VATS, this skill is not useful to you. If you're big on using VATS and use VATS for everything you do, then you may want to take this one to increase your damage when you do land a critical, so that you can save some ammo. But due to it only being something that works during VATS, I'm going to make it B ranking. Then we have Ninja, and this is really good for stealth playthroughs. If you land a sneak attack, you deal extra damage. This combines really well with Mr. Sandman with a silencer, upping your damage by quite a lot, and this is really good for snipers and stealth builds. So we'll drop this into the B classification. Then we have Idiot Savant, which essentially gives you extra XP whenever it activates. So it's only useful if it activates. Its activation percentage is low, and the higher your intelligence is, the lower the chance of activating this is. Even if you have no intelligence, this will still rarely activate, making it very unreliable and unuseful, because you need this to activate when turning in quests every time to really level up fast enough to make this worth taking over intelligence. So we're going to drop this into the D classification. And next up we have Science. And basically Science is a crafting skill for those that like to use radiation and energy weapons. It will allow you a few other modifications for your normal guns, but this is another crafting class. This also allows crafting certain things in settlements, such as better turrets and several other things throughout the game. So this is a useful skill to have, so we'll drop it into the A classification. So when you need it, you can take it, but it's not necessary for every playthrough. Next up, we have Steady Aim. This is for players who don't like to aim down the barrel of their gun, they just want to fire from the hip. This will allow for more accurate firing from the hip. I mean, this is a waste of points. You can just tap the aim button and get the same effect. You don't have to hold the aim button down, you just tap it. Kind of like quick scoping in Call of Duty. So go ahead and drop this into the D ranking. Right now we have gun bashing, and what this allows you to do is, when you're using a gun and someone gets close to you, you can hit the bash button and smack them in the face with your gun. And essentially this skill just increases that damage, making gun bashing super powerful. It's not necessary to have, it is fun to have, so we'll drop it into the C ranking, since it is good, but it's not necessary. I'm sorry, I'm mistaken. That should be B ranking, not C. And then we have Rooted, which basically increases how much damage you output versus how much damage you take. So you take less damage, you output more damage if you do not move during combat. I don't know how many of you out there just stand perfectly still in combat in the game. I definitely don't. So this is pretty much more useless than the sprinting one. So I'm going to drop this into the D rank. Then we have Sniping, and you would think this skill would be really good, but ultimately it just lets you hold your breath longer and then gives you slightly more accurate shots in VATS. Well, I mean, just slightly. So VATS doesn't work for very far away, so VATS isn't great for sniping in this game. I mean, yeah, so far away, you only get like a chance of hitting somebody in the head by 9, and then if you take this skill, you max the skill out, it ups it to like 35. Still not good, still a waste of ammo when you have a guaranteed shot of hitting them in the head if you just aim it yourself. And the amount of points you have to put into perception, if you're not putting them into perception just to get to the ability to hold your breath longer, it just is not worth it. Right, so this is definitely not necessary and a waste of points to get to it if you're not already putting points there. So we'll drop it into D. Inspirational. How does that go? This is like the opposite of Lone Wonder. If you travel with companions, this is a must because it allows your companions to do more damage. They won't no longer hurt you, and you can no longer hurt them. So we'll drop this up here into the A classification with Lone Wanderer. Next up, we have Critical Banker. And what this allows you to do is, when in VATS, if you score critical, instead of critting, you can just store the critical up. And you can, the higher level this is, the more criticals you can store. So when you're fighting somebody stronger, you can activate that critical at will, allowing you to do more damage and possibly get out of a worse situation. So Critical Banker is really nice, especially if you are a big VAT user. If you don't use VATS, this skill is useless. So we're going to give it a B ranking because it's extremely circumstantial. All right, next up is Penetrator, and what this basically lets you do in VATS. Somebody's around a corner or behind an obstacle that you can kind of see part of them. And VATS won't let you target them. This will allow you to target them in VATS instead of having a 0% or like a 15% chance. You can increase it a little bit. But if you don't use VATS, you can just aim and hit them anyway. And even if you do use VATS, this only increases your chances a little bit while they're in cover, and it just doesn't seem so circumstantial that it's not all that useful in most scenarios. So this is a good one to maybe take if you're a big VAT user after you've gotten all the other combat skills you would like. So I would drop this into the C classification. Next up, we have Adamantiums. This basically reduces fall damage and keeps your bones from breaking. If you've ever been in combat and had a limb break, you know how frustrating it can be and how devastating it can be to you. So this one's alright to take. But for the most part, you just quickly stick yourself with a stem and your bones no longer broken. So we'll drop this into the C classification. Then we have Cannibalism, and this allows you to recover hit points by eating dead people. So kill someone, you can eat them to heal up. It's funny, but it's not all that useful. You have plenty of other ways to heal in the game without needing to resort to cannibalism. But if that's your play, so this is more of kind of a probably maybe RP playstyle type thing than it is a useful perk. So we're going to drop it into the D classification because it can be fun, it can be funny, but it's not all that useful. All right, next up we have Ghoulish, and basically this lets radiations stuff heal you. So radiated food, radiated attacks, radiated water, radiated everything heals you, lets you recover hit points, but also radiates you, which also decreases your total hit points. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there, right? And sometimes feral ghouls will kind of be friendly towards you and not attack you, and may even fight your enemies if they happen to be in the same area. But they probably would have done that anyway, because feral ghouls pretty much attack everybody. And other items in the game can pretty much do what this does, so there's no point in getting yourself radiated just to heal, unless you just want to. So this is more of an RP thing than it would be an actual perk. So we'll drop it into the D classification. Then we have Party Person, and basically this allows you to handle alcohol better and eventually become immune to its effects. But there isn't that much alcohol in this game, and most alcohol in this game only increases your stats by 1 or 2. It isn't all that useful. You may want to take 1 every now and again for trading deals, but for the most part, I don't see anybody really downing enough alcohol to make taking this perk, putting enough points to get to this perk, and then using this perk worth it. So we'll go ahead and drop this into the D classification. Then we have Chemist, and what this does is the chems in the game are increased by using this. You increase the duration and stats, you just make them overall better. So if you're going to be using Jet, Buff Out, and things like that, Chemist is a really good one to take, but it's not necessary for the game, so we're going to drop this into B classification. Next up, we have Nuclear Physicist, and what this allows you to do basically is increase nuclear-specific weapons. There aren't that many in the game, so I don't know how often you'll be using these, so this is not one that it's going to be one of your main skills, but one of the best benefits from this, though, is the fusion core benefits. Right, you get basically extend the lifespan of your fusion cores in your power suit. So if you're a big power suit user, this one's good. And if you use the nuclear weapons, this one is good as well, but it's not one that's going to get you through the game early on anyway. So we'll drop it into B classification. All right, and so something went wrong on this tool, and all the files are back down here. So we're going to try and sort through this and pull the ones we haven't done already. So let's. All right, so next up is quick reload. And basically what this does is allows you to reload your guns quicker, and it costs no AP in VATS to reload, which is really nice for people using VATS. And this is a really good one to have if you're using guns, and so I'm going to drop it into the S tier. And then next up we have Blitz, and this one is extremely situational. What this basically lets you do is when using, if you don't know, using melee and VATS is not great. You have to be right up in someone's face to make it work, but this will allow you to dash to somebody at a medium distance from you while using VATS. So it's extremely situational, only if you're using melee and only in VATS, so we'll drop it into the C classification. All right, then next we have Grim Reaper Sprint, which basically recovers your AP points all the way when you get a kill in VATS, and it can also land you some extra criticals that you can store with your critical banker or use. So this is really good if you're using a VATS build that relies on critical hits, if you're using VATS a lot, so this is going to be ranked. So now we're going to move down into basically the ultimates, the things that require you to be level 10 in a specific stat to access. So hopefully I haven't missed any of them before. The pre-level 10 ones, this kind of got messed up, so I'm not. So I looked through it and it doesn't seem like I have, but if I have, I apologize. Just let me know in the comments if I missed anything. Also, let me know in the comments if you think any of these are ranked too high or too low compared for what you would use them for. Alright, so let's go into the ultimates. We have Ricochet. And basically what Ricochet does is allows you to ricochet bullets. You have a small chance of ricocheting a bullet back, which instantly kills an enemy. And the lower your health is, the higher that chance goes. Only this chance is extremely low. It's even lower than Idiot Savant, it seems. And so unless you're at super low health, I mean, this could save you at super low health, but for the most part, it's not going to proc very often. So I would drop this into the C classification. Then we have Gun Fu, which basically allows you to increase damage to other targets. The fourth target and beyond are instantly critted, making this really nice if you're using VATS. This is a VATS only skill. But if you are using a VATS build, this one is really good. This one is really good to take. So we'll drop this into the B classification. Then we have Nerd Rage, and what this basically does, if your health drops below 20%, so when you're high level and you have 300 to 1500 health, depending on your level, 20% could still be quite a lot of health left. But what this will do is when you drop to 20%, it will slow down time. So if you're like me, and you may not realize your health is dropping during combat, this will save you big time, because when this procs, you're like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. And you can start popping health items, and you also get increased damage and damage resistance, so you can survive longer and potentially kill your enemies easier. And at some point, you'll heal off of killing your enemies as well, making this a perk I would get on every playthrough, but I can see why some players may not want it. And also, if you have a high health, you can always use radiation to push your health down to 20% and live in Nerd Rage. So we'll drop this as a classification. Right, then we have Intimidation, and this works like those others, like the Robot Expert, the Wasteland Whisperer, and the Animal Friend. Basically, you point a gun at a human, you can pacify them, and then you can give them commands. Doesn't work great, but the good thing is the humans have ranged weapons and can fight a little bit. So it'll be slightly better than the other ones, but just slightly, so it'll be C ranked. Honestly, would only put points in this for fun. Then we have Solar Powered, and this is kind of like the nighttime thing. It only works during the day. So only being useful during the day, and most of its effects you get from other items, making this pretty much useless. So we'll drop into the D ranking. That said, if you're playing on survival mode and you can't get back to the settlement very easily, this could be a way of recovering from radiation and from some damage. Then we have Concentrated Fire, and this does not go well with Gun Fu. So I would take Gun Fu or this, but in VATS, with this one, you can target a limb and each successful hit on that specific limb will deal increasing damage. This skill seems more for fun than usefulness, so I would drop it into C classification. Right, then we have the Pain Train, and well, this is basically makes your power armor stronger. You can sprint into enemies and kill them. You can jump off buildings and do superhero landings and kill your enemies. And ultimately, just it's a lot of fun. Makes running around in power armor more useful. This skill's a lot of fun for a short while, but it is useful, so we'll drop it into the B classification. Right, then we have the 4-leaf clover, which if you're going to be a VAT user and you've already taken critical banker and critical hits, this is a really nice one to take because every hit, so it doesn't have to be a critical, every single hit you land in VATS gives you a chance to fill up your critical banker skill. So this is a really good one to take for that. So we'll drop this into the B classification. I would put it into A, but unless you're using VATS, it's not useful. Now, if you like this tier list and you want a copy of it, I'll have the image file in the Discord, and I'll also pop one up on Reddit. If I counted through this correctly, there's only 70 here, which means one's missing, but I can't figure out which one that is, so it's probably not an important one. So if I did miss one and you know what it is, let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, smash that like button. Have an awesome day.